And the source of suffering for humanity is that almost all of humanity is living in ignorance. Ignorance of the truth of who they are, and ignorance of the truth of the way it is. So if you're not being who you are, and you're not living in the world the way the world is, can you see that's not going to work out very well? It's going to result in constant suffering. It's going to result in constant conflict, and the conflict arises when we unwittingly identify ourselves with the mental state. We are unwittingly identify ourselves with the mental state. In other words, we don't know we're doing that. For people that have never heard the teaching, as far as they're concerned, who they take themselves to be is who they are. That's the identity of humanity. Who people take themselves to be is who they are. Well, who did they take themselves to be? They take themselves to be a physical body, and they take themselves to be a personality or a self-concept. That's who they take themselves to be. And who they take themselves to be operates in the mind all the time. Operates in the mind as a thought process. And the thought process is a thought process that's coming from all the experiences that you've ever had in your life since you were born, that got recorded in the mind. Right? One of the definitions of the mind that was given by one of the teachers that I studied is a successive recording of a successive, complete recording of successive moments of now, called the memory. And so we remember our personal history and everything that happened to us as children and adolescents during the formative times in our life is where we made the conclusions about who we are and about how it is. By the time you're a teenager, that's done. By the time you're a teenager, your identity and your understanding of reality has been completed. Now you're just trying to use that identity and that reality to do what? Yeah, guaranteed the right to pursue happiness, right? Yeah. So we all know who we are, and we all know how it is. Now what's left to do is use that and pursue happiness. How's that going? It's not going too well, right? Yeah, because the reason it doesn't work is because the pursuit of happiness ends up being me getting what I want. That's the pursuit of happiness, me getting what I want. Me who I believe I am, that I'm not, getting what I want from the world with my understanding of how the world works, which isn't the way the world works. So me who I think I am, which is who I'm not, trying to be happy in the world by doing everything that I believe would work given my understanding of the world, which is wrong. Where's that going to go? Nowhere. It can't go anywhere. It's amazing, really, when you stop and when you get as old as I am and as old as some of the other people in this room are, right? You're old enough to look back and realize, what the hell was I thinking? Right? You know, my Zen teacher the other night, somebody asked him about profound melancholy. It was in his book. He talked about profound, and they were asking him, what do you mean by, what's that mean, profound melancholy? And he said, profound melancholy is the sadness that I experience when I look back at my life at what an asshole I was before I woke up. That's profound melancholy. Isn't that a privilege? Isn't it a privilege to be able to look back on your life and realize that you're not an asshole anymore? Yeah. And it's not even that you're not an asshole anymore. It's that you may still act like one, but you know your true nature is not an asshole. Your true nature is a loving, kind, conscious, awake human being that's already happy. So that's the end of the pursuit. You know, when you discover your true nature, you discover that you're already happy, so you don't have to keep wasting all your energy pursuing it anymore. No? When you look at life, and when I look at my life, and I look back in my life, and this is the case, generally speaking, if you have the audacity to look at your life, and most people don't have the audacity to look at their life. That's too dangerous. You may see what's really going on. But if you look at your life and you ask the right questions, when I look back at my life when I was in my teens, and my 20s, and my 30s, and my 40s, and my 50s, the experience that I was having, and I think it's pretty common, right, that everybody is living their life like there's something over there that's not here. Isn't it? There's something over there that's not here, and what's over there is better than what's here. So I'm going to keep chasing what's over there. And every time I get what's over there, it moves. Every time I get what's over there is different again, right? So now I'm pursuing that over there, right? If you look back in your life, right, that's the case for all of us, right? Look back in your life. There was a time in your life when you thought, if I got X, I'll be happy. Or if when X happens, I'll be happy, right? That's the way the mind works. It's always looking into the future, right? It's always looking into the future. Why is it always looking into the future? Or the past. Take your pick. Why is it always looking into the future and into the past? Who you take yourself to be does not exist in the present moment. Who you take yourself to be does not exist in the present moment because it isn't real. Now, so here's why that's so, right? Because it isn't real, because the self-concept that you take yourself to be doesn't actually exist, right? So because it doesn't actually exist, it can't be actually here. So in the present moment, it's not there. So why would you be interested in the present moment? You can't be in the present moment, so you're not interested in the present moment. You're interested in where there's evidence that you exist. Like if I can imagine myself in the future, and when you imagine yourself in the future, what you imagine yourself as. If you imagine yourself right now in the future, what do you see when you look in your mind's eye? What do you look like in the future? If you imagine yourself in the future right now, what do you see in your mind's eye? This isn't a trick question.
Somebody older. In your mind's eye.
Yeah.
Old age, sickness, death.
No, don't overthink. What do you see? If I say to you, imagine yourself, look at yourself tomorrow. What do you see when you look? What is in that image you're looking at?
There's comfort for me.
No, you're thinking too much.
My body.
Yeah, your body, isn't it? If I ask you to imagine yourself in the future, you imagine a body, don't you?
Okay,
Yeah.
Also imagine my body as it looked 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, if you're going to imagine, you might as well do it well, right? So you're going to imagine yourself in the future or in the past because you can show up there as a body. You can show up there. The self-concept can be realized, right? But in the present moment, that's why if somebody is in the present moment completely, like a long-distance runner when they're in the zone, if somebody's in the present moment, completely in the present moment, are they there?
Yes.
Really? If you ask somebody that's in the zone, what are you experiencing when you're in the zone? If you ask a runner, what are you experiencing when you're in the zone? If you ask a jazz musician, what are you experiencing when you're in the music?
Happiness.
Are they experiencing a person? No. This is one of the interesting things to take note of, If you want to experience yourself, okay, where do you exist in reality? Here and now, right? Here and now. You exist here and now, right? In reality, you exist here and now. And when you're experiencing being present to that here and now, okay, what's there? If you talk to a long distance runner when they're in the zone and you ask them, when you're in the zone, right, what are you aware of?
Nothing.
No, they're not aware of nothing. They won't say nothing. If you ask the jazz musician, when you're in the middle of playing your instrument, what are you aware of? When you're in the middle of playing the music, what are you aware of?
The music.
The music.
Yeah, I get it.
If you ask a runner, what are you aware of when you're in the zone, they'll say running.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're not there. And here's the paradox. When you're not there, you're there. That's what you are, is not a thing. Nothing. That's what you are, is not a thing. Nothing. Right? So when you're totally present to the moment, you're the space that things happen in. You're the silence sound happens in. You're the stillness activity happens in. Right? And when you're experiencing being the space that things happen in, is what's happening the source of your well-being? Is the space in this room being affected by our presence?
No.
No. This is getting to know yourself. This is getting to know your true nature, the natural state. Coming to the understanding that it is possible at all times. Coming to the understanding that right now you are happy. Right now you are at peace. Right now you are happy and you are at peace. And so you may say, well, I don't agree with you that I'm happy and I'm at peace right now. That's right. Because you're still in the identity that's suffering. But that identity is an overlay of what you are. It's an overlay of what you are, right? So the happiness and the peace is your true nature, right? But it's being overlaid all the time by the thought process coming from your conditioning that says you're the body and you're your personality and life sucks and then you die. Doesn't it? That the thought process in your mind is producing an illusion that's not true. It's not real. It's not what you actually are, right? It's an implication. It implies what you are, but it can't ever produce evidence for it because it doesn't exist. It can't ever produce evidence for it because it doesn't exist. It's an implication. When you're thinking, look, when you're thinking, the underlying most important aspect of the thought process is not the content. When you're thinking, the underlying most important aspect of the thought activity is not the content. In other words, it's not what you're thinking about. That's not the most important part of the thought process. What you're thinking about is changing all the time. It's not what you're thinking about, right? This is something we never look at, right? But if you look at it, it's very revealing. What does the thought process imply? What the thought process implies, right, is that there is an entity, right, that exists that is consistent with what the thought process says it is. So the thought process says you're your body. The thought process says you're your conditioning. The thought process says you're the concept that you call yourself, the self-concept. The thought process says that. It doesn't matter what you're thinking about. Just the fact that the thinking activity is occurring implies your existence. It's an implication. It's implying your existence all the time. That's one of the reasons why, if you want to experience your true nature, one of the things you have to do is experience what it's like not to think, called meditation. When you move your attention away from the thought activity and you briefly, for moments at a time, experience the absence of thought, during that time you're in contact with reality. Because during that time you're experiencing the actuality of what you are. Right? If I say, well, if I ask you then, well, what is that? How do you describe yourself if during the time of meditation and your attention is moved away from the thought activity to experience the awareness of the body breathing, And when you're away from the thinking process and you're experiencing the body breathing, you're experiencing reality. What is the reality? The awareness that you are is real, and that real awareness is experiencing the body breathing, and that real awareness is aware that it's not the body, it's experiencing the body breathing. You've made contact with reality, even if it's for a brief moment. Right? But until you've had that contact, your whole world is thought. Right? Until you make that contact, your whole world is thought. You are living your world in a thought process all the time, 24/7. This is what people kill themselves to get away from. Isn't it? Yeah. It's what they kill themselves to get away from, right? Because it's so torturous. The tyranny of the thought activity is so torturous that people will do anything to escape it. Well, they'll take drugs that will kill the body in an attempt to escape from their mind, won't they? Of course they will. Not a problem at all, right? People are doing everything in their power, right, to avoid their experience of the world, because the world occurs to people as a threat. Right? So your life is about having a constant experience of being in conflict with everything that's happening all the time, right? And that's called life. That's called life. Right? Yeah, so when you start to make contact with the reality of who you are, it becomes possible to begin to open up a new world. It becomes possible to open up a new realm of possibility in which the possibility of happiness is always available. Before you had contact with the truth, before you made contact with the reality of what you are, was happiness available at all times? No, it's not available at all times. In fact, it wasn't available at all, because what people call happiness is just getting what you want. That's not happiness. That's gratification. That's not happiness. So one of the things that you have to do if you want to pursue happiness is correct the definition of it. Real happiness is not getting what you want. Real happiness is experiencing who you are. It's a state of being. It's not something you're doing. You can't do happiness. You can be happy, but you can't do happiness. You can be at peace, but you can't do peace. That would be activity, right? So we're talking here about a state of being, right? Not an act of doing. And most people's life is an act of doing, is it not? Yeah. When you wake up in the morning, you start doing things, don't you? And you do things until you go to sleep at night. So your life is a doing life. So people do meditation, right? If you're doing meditation, you're sitting there thinking. That's doing meditation. You can't do meditation. Meditation is a be. Meditation is experiencing something that's already true. You don't have to achieve meditation. Meditation is already true. What you're doing is just allowing yourself to be still, be silent, relax the system, and then use the power of attention to move attention from the thinking activity away from that to experiencing the body sitting here breathing. And the experience of the body sitting here breathing is the experience of being aware of the body sitting here breathing. And that's reality. Rather than being the body, I'm aware of the body breathing. Rather than being the identity that I think I am, I'm experiencing my true nature as awareness itself. Now I've made contact with what has the real possibility of happiness. This is very important to understand, because if you really get this, right, not like some academic thing, not like something you learned, not just like information, right, but if you really get this like the capital T truth, right, if you really get this, it will change the direction of your life. Do you know that the experience of being can be talked about in terms of it being a field of energy? Does that make sense? The experience of being could be described as the experience of being a field of energy instead of a specific body or a specific, thing. your field of energy now called consciousness, right? And when you're experiencing yourself as this field of energy, right? The behavior that comes from this field is different from the behavior that will come from your mind. Just let that sink in. When you're in a state of being, when you're experiencing yourself as consciousness, when you're experiencing yourself as consciousness, that consciousness that you're experiencing yourself as has no needs, has no wants, never gets hungry, right? It's never going anywhere, it's always here, right? There's no there, it's always here. There's no time, it's always now, right? So that experience that's available at all times is an experience of being what you actually are, and it's available at all times, and it's a field of energy. It is not it's not an identity that has a condition. It's not an identity that has a form. It's an identity that is in full acceptance of everything all the time, and it's identity that sees itself in everything that appears. You follow me? It's an identity that sees itself in everything that appears. So everything is what I am, right? So how would I treat everything? Yeah, not only with love, but as love. Because if you're going to describe your true nature as something, as that which is formless, timeless, shapeless, has no needs, right? If you have no need and you don't need anything, well, I heard this the other day, it really stuck with me. Yeah. What is the hallmark of an awake human being in terms of their behavior? Remember, you're complete, you're satisfied, you're at peace, you're happy, you don't need anything, right? How are you going to behave in relationship to other people? It's interesting because this isn't something that's obvious until you look at it and see it for what it is, and then you can see the obviousness of it, right? The behavior that is the hallmark of an enlightened human being is generosity. It's generosity. Because if I'm complete and I don't need anything and I'm happy and content, right? What do I do with my energy? I give it. I give it, right? And you discover through the act of giving and through the act of generosity that you are experiencing being love. You're experiencing the manifestation of love. Is there anything that's a more clear experience of love than generosity? When people are moved, it's because they're put in touch with something that lives below the area of typical awareness. It lives below that area all the time. So what we're talking about here, I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and I asked this person, he's around my age, a pretty conscious person, pretty awake, not 100%, but pretty awake. And I said, well, what's your experience as it relates to these teachings in terms of your true nature? And where is that experience occurring? And he said, well, it's in the background. It's in the background. I'm aware of it all the time. It's in the background. And I said, well, what's in the foreground? And he said, well, in the foreground is my personality and, my thoughts and my feelings and my behaviors and all that, right? And I said, oh, that's interesting. If it was possible for that, instead of being in the background, to have that in the foreground and put your personality in the background, would you make that switch? And he said, I never thought of that. Most people don't. But that's exactly what meditation is. Meditation is a practice in which you can begin to become familiar with the possibility of happiness as your nature, instead of something that you're trying to achieve. It's a different ball game, isn't it? It's the best game in town because you win before you play, right? In the game of life, you don't win before you play, you have to play to win, right? And the possibility of losing is there, right? And so you have to try and figure shit out and get good at, strategies and all that stuff, right? But when it comes to your true nature, you win the game and then play. So you're happy first and then you participate in the world. That's bass backwards to most people's way of understanding things. But if you practice meditation consistently, this will gradually dawn on you. It'll gradually dawn on you. You'll gradually begin to experience a natural state in which, without any way of understanding it, because it's beyond concepts, right? You just start to experience a state of happiness that is not the result of anything. A state of being happy that's not the result of anything. It's not coming from anything you did. It's not an achievement that you did. It's not an outcome. It's not a result you produced. It was already the case, and it's always already the case. And if you come to understand this, right, through the practice of meditation, then eventually you start living this as a way of life instead of a practice, right? It becomes a way of living your life instead of something you're practicing. How does it become a way of living your life? The way it becomes a way of living your life is you understand that I have to consistently be paying attention to the mental activity, because that mental activity, right, is not the truth. It's not the truth. The mental activity is not the truth, and it cannot produce freedom. It cannot produce well-being. It cannot produce happiness. So you have to start paying attention constantly to the mental activity, understanding that this is your conditioning. This is about survival, not happiness. So if you're paying attention to this, right, when it's going off the rails and the thinking and the emotions are all crazy and spinning around and everything, right, your job is to calm that shit down. If you're awake, your job is to understand you have a mind, you're not the mind. And the mind you have is your conditioning. And that conditioning is for survival, not happiness. And it's going to play that conditioning as if your happiness is at stake all the time and you feel threatened all the time by what's happening. It's going to operate that way. So you have to pay attention to it all the time, not identify with it, understand that it is a mechanism. It's a mechanism. It's a program. It can only do what it was programmed to do, and it's not programmed for happiness. So you have to pay attention to it, understanding that it is not going to produce happiness, and you have to train it to calm down. You have to train it to start to be consistent with your true nature. Now that'll take time to do that, because you've been practicing being as crazy as your mind for years, which means you have deep grooves in your brain. You know, you have deep neural patterns in your brain that are survival neural patterns, right? And they'll come up as thought processes and emotions that will have you behave as if you're threatened, and have you behave as if you're chasing happiness. And if you see things as they are, if you understand the truth, you realize it makes no sense to chase happiness when you're already happy. It makes no sense to chase your identity when you're already who you are. It makes no sense. And yet that's what most people are doing. And most people will spend all their life energy. They'll spend all their life energy until the body drops, right? Trying to experience what they're already experiencing. How insane do you want to get? Right? Trying to experience what you're already experiencing. Why don't people know they're already experiencing it? Because they're paying attention to what's not ever going to experience anything. And they're confused, and they believe that operation is their operation. That thought process is my thought process. That mind is who I am. And as long as you're stuck in that state, as long as you're stuck in that state of mind, your life cannot experience well-being and happiness. It's not possible. It's not possible. It can't happen. It will never happen. If you understand this, then the importance of meditation takes on a new definition, doesn't it? If you understand this, the importance of meditation takes on a new definition. You're meditating every day. It's like somebody that is suffering from an inability to breathe, getting oxygen. That's the way you should relate to meditation. And if you're persistent enough and you practice it consistent enough, eventually what will start to happen is you will start to experience being in a more expanded, open state of being. You'll start to experience a relief. You'll start to experience a state of purity, a state of consciousness that has purity, that is complete, that is fulfilled, that is always here, never not here. I was listening to the Dalai Lama talk about meditation to a group that asked him to explain, the group asked him to explain how to meditate. And one of the things he said was very interesting. He said, first sit still and be silent and be still. And just keep practicing this, and you have to have an absolute commitment to this practice because it's going to take some time before you start to experience the difference it makes. But if you stay with the practice over time, gradually you begin to have an experience. And the word that the Dalai Lama used to describe the experience is purity. He said, how will you know when you're actually starting to experience the experience of meditation? It's pure. It's empty. It's fulfilled. It's complete. And this is an experience that you're having, so it occurs to you as a relief from what? The constant mental process that produces anxiety, produces agitation, produces restlessness. So if you understand what I'm talking about, right, then you should be clear that meditation should be as important to you as brushing your teeth. More important than brushing your teeth. You can be happy without teeth.